It's Thursday, April 23rd, 2020, and coming to you from lockdown London, this is the Product Mentor Talk. I'm John Masterson, the Chief Product Officer at ImproveWell. And I'm a mentor in the Product Mentor Program. The Product Mentor Program is a global initiative in over 20 countries around the world where mentors and mentees get paired up in the field of product management to help make better product decisions, better products, and most importantly, better product people. Learn more at theproductmentor.com. And today, I'm going to be leading a discussion on the topic, how I do product. Please post your questions to the chat in YouTube and they will be answered in real time. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to kick off my presentation. So what I want to talk about today is how I do product. And really what I want to try and do is get into a practical guide. I think during my time, this is my second time as a mentor, I've kind of realized that certainly with the people that I've worked with, there's been a real desire to get to see the actual tools that people are using. So that's the way that I want to approach it. And I'm going to jump in. So please, as I said, drop your questions in. We'll have a bit of a discussion and I'll try and just tell you how I do it. So the first thing I'm going to look at is just a little bit about me. So first thing is as I mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer for ImproveWell. You can see that lovely black and white photo of me when I used to have access to a hairdresser on a regular basis. And unfortunately, the lockdown has meant that things have got a little bit out of control. But really, I work for ImproveWell and we are a health tech company. And we have a workforce engagement platform. We have mobile apps and a web platform. And really, we're giving a voice to frontline staff. So obviously, in this time of crisis of the COVID-19, it's a really interesting time for us as we see people using our platform, and we just try to support the healthcare workers as much as we can. So really, what I want to talk about is I think why it's important to give a little bit of a flavor of my experience is I'm going to talk about what sort of for you to try and understand what type of product person you are, and how do you fit in with your organization, and how are you best suiting the needs. So ImproveWell, we're a small team here. So I work very closely with the CEO and with the customer team, and we're very close to our customers. So a lot of the things that we do are based on a huge amount of communication. This may not be the same, obviously, for yourselves. So in larger organizations, things will be a little bit different. But my background is this is the second startup that I've worked at here in London. Prior to that, I was in Sydney for 7 years, where I worked in a software as a service company there. But again, I've always really been very much focused on the business side, on the commercial side, and really looking at from a customer-centric point of view. So I really love solving problems for customers. I love getting new features out. That's one of the things that I really enjoy doing. I still get a buzz from it now. But really what that means is that I have to put in place some measures to make sure that I'm having things thoroughly tested, because the natural part of my excitement is to get those new features out there. So really, I found over my career what's important is you need to identify what are the traits that you have, and try and come up with systematic approaches that will actually allow you to enhance those strengths and maybe help you with some of the weaknesses. So we had a soft seminar last year at ImproveWell, and one of the things that I sort of was asked to do was really to sum up what my role is. So my role, or what I've further on the presentation, I've also called my personal mission, is For me, it's selecting and building the right features in a secure and sustainable way. So I work really closely, as I said, with the team, and I try and help them to ensure continually, how are we actually building the right things? How do we select the right things? Because once you've selected it, as we know, you're on the road. And then obviously making sure that we can do it in a secure way. So we work with in healthcare. So obviously we need to make sure that we're taking all of the correct security procedures around information governance and how we house our data, all that sort of thing. And then finally, I think the sustainable way was really important for me as well, because it's I need to make sure that 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, we can still build more and more features on top of those. So those are the kind of things that I think sums up my my role here at Improve Well. And again, I'd sort of encourage you during this to reflect on that yourself and sort of think, what can you sum up what your role is in your organization. So it's going to give an overview of the topic. So what I want to talk about today. So the first thing, as I said, is why this talk. So obviously, I think we've been really fortunate actually with all of these talks that we see through the Product Mentor program is that you're really getting really interesting and a really diverse array of opinions. And speaking frankly, you're going to look at my talk and you're going to listen to some of it and not agree with all of it, and that's fine. And I think that's great. I'd encourage you to do that. I mean, what I really am trying to instill in people is this is one way of doing it, but take from it what you will. Post any questions you have, and I can discuss why I've made particular decisions for things. But yeah, I like anytime I watch anything, I take some things, throw the other things away. But usually, hopefully, you'll end up with a few little gems that are useful for you. So as I mentioned, I really would encourage you to look at what type of product manager you are, and also what type does your organization need. So just unpack that a little bit. We're going to talk about then the central premise of my talk, of my argument, what I'm calling the development iceberg. So I don't want to give too much away because it's but you might notice that I've gone for a lovely little sort of ice blue motif throughout my presentation. So that's to reflect this major concept that I'm going to get into. And then in keeping with that analogy, we're going to look at what I call underwater activities. So obviously you've got the tip of the iceberg out of the water, but underwater is all these other things that go into it to make it as effective as possible. So what to build? So probably a pretty fundamental question, but it's the first thing you need to look at. What should we actually build? How do you integrate design? And again, there's a huge range of, there'll be teams and companies here who have, full design teams through to doing a bit of it yourself. So just a few words on how we do that. Then we're going to get into product description documents. So again, everyone has them, product requirements. They've got lots of different names, product specs, all sorts of things. I like to call them product description documents. I'm just going to take you through what my thinking is on those, who they're for, what you should be, maybe some of the little tweaks you should be looking for in those. Tickets, always tickets. So again, I think, certainly as long as I've been involved in products, you always have to do tickets. You always have to create tickets. For me, it's Jira. But again, I do think they are vital. And I do think there's a sort of a way of doing them that I have found is a little bit more effective. And then finally, just again, many of us anyway, will work in agile environments. We put a huge amount of effort into the agile process with our development teams. But again, you need, for me, I think you need to look at all of the different aspects of the process as being constantly reviewed and constantly refined. So I was going to talk a little bit around how I kind of try and do that. So yeah, that's going to be the purpose of my talk, or sorry, the content of my talk. And yeah, I'm going to jump in. So the first thing is, what I have a look at is, as I said, what type of product manager are you? So assess your skills. This is something that I've worked with previous people on, is actually doing an assessment of what are the areas that you're where your skills are lying. So be really honest with yourself and understand, are you strong in UX? Are you strong on maybe more some of the more technical aspects? For me, I've always come to this. I many moons ago was a database developer. That's where I kind of got into the technology world. So I always come to it from the database. I always start with it. That's what makes sense to me. I think of it in that, rows, columns in the database. Probably an area that I've less, skills is in the design UX area, because I haven't necessarily had as much experience there. So understand and know where your skills lie. Be honest with yourself, and then just seek support in those particular areas. You also need to think about where is your organization on the product journey. So again, as I said, we've been, Jordan gave an excellent talk on being the first product person at a company there, and what that is like. For me at Improvewell, I'm essentially the only guy really on the product team. So I cover a range of different things, but are you, where is your organization? Are they ready for, a really strict, fully rolled out sort of product process, or you need to refine it to test the appetite for that type of thing within your organization? And then I really think this is a piece of advice I would always give to people, and not just in the world of product, but is think about your toolkit. So for me, if I was to pick up my tools tomorrow and go and work in another organization, I have a set of tools. I would pick up what I'm about to describe to you, and I would bring it to there. So start thinking about your professional toolkit. What are the things you like to use? How do you do it? How do they all come together? Where are the areas that you're looking to tweak and you're looking to improve? So for me, I would always think of it almost like could be like a production line, or, you're always looking at the different aspects. Okay, I need to tighten up a little bit. As I mentioned, UX was something I needed to tighten up on. But recently we've done a good bit of work on that. Then I'll be happy with that piece. Then I might get into, okay, well, how's my how am I socializing this with stakeholders in the organization? So again, break your process down into a series of steps, and then sort of think about what are you using for each of those steps, and assess those. And then I think as well, have a think about your own personal mission. So what is your personal mission? So are you there to work closely with the development team? Are you there to we're all going to be doing slightly different versions of a product role. I think I covered mine up at the top, and I sort of lean a little bit into almost the CTO role within my current company. So I think it's really good to be defining that. A key part of really not just sort of products, understanding yourself as a product person, but just any career advice really is, reflecting on where you lie in the organization, and what is it you're ultimately there to do, and socialize that with people. Socialize that with your with your managers, with your peers, with your stakeholders, and sort of make sure that you have the same the same personal mission, because if those things are misaligned, that can be problematic. All right, so the development iceberg, I built it up massively in one of my earlier slides, so now it's time to jump into this. So for me, I am obviously a huge believer in product management. I think that it's a force multiplier for improving, the development process, the software, feature process. And I think that I'm obviously biased, but that's what I would say. So, and what I see really the core activity, and when I was first describing the purpose of this talk, it really comes down to this idea. If we consider that the entire iceberg is the effort involved in getting from ideation through to release for a particular feature, the very often I think I have seen or in certain organizations that there's too much focus on the bit that juts out of the water. So when the sprint starts, so let's imagine that the water line is when the sprint starts. So when the sprint starts, that's the time when we're thinking about, okay, well, what's this button going to look like, or how's that, well, is that we already have a, so for me, I think that's too late at that point. And I think, unfortunately, that's the piece above the water is the bit when, where everyone can see you, where it's out in public. You will have made some commitments around delivery. And I think in the places that I've been successful with product, it's focusing on the underwater activities is really where you're going to start seeing, start delivering real benefits, and also making for a sort of more serene delivery cycle, call it. So for me, the underwater activities are all of those things that you're doing. I would say in my head, sort of a 6, 8, 10-week cycle might be kind of what you're looking at here. But let's say, for argument's sake, it's 4 weeks of underwater activities and 2 weeks of actual development work, for example. So this is what I'm talking about here is everywhere that I have worked, the development resource has been the most scarce commodity. It's been, it can often be expensive. It can often be hard to get, so that is the piece of the production line that you really want to make sure goes as smoothly as possible. So all of these supporting activities that lead up to it, these are the ones that you really need to spend your time on. So I won't labor the point anymore. I think I've kind of moved through it in enough detail, but let's get into some of what I mean by some of these underwater activities. So, as I mentioned, what to build? Fundamentally, a very important question. And I think that, again, speaking from experience and things that I've done myself, this is often not quite as scientific as we would like it to be. We're all human, and we all build things because of, it's been maybe it's a hot topic in support. Maybe it's something that is annoying you as a product person when you're using the system. Or I can think of 5 things in my current product that I would love to change, but really probably, are not as valuable to our users. So I think understanding what to build is really, really important. And it's going to take you through the process that we've come up with. And again, you can sort of hopefully grab a few things from that. So I'm going to talk a little bit as well about integrating design. So obviously design is hugely important. But, I think it's also really key that there's a connection between the design and the ultimate development that is done. We'll go through the product requirement docs in detail, what should be in them, and what shouldn't, I think. And now I'd like to talk a little bit as well about sort of stakeholder interaction. So you'll often hear even the phrase itself, stakeholder, is you'll often hear the actually questions come in, so I'm just going to jump on that because I think it's quite a good one, which is about the underwater activities. Bear with me a second. Okay, so the question is, if it's 4 weeks of underwater work, I love the way that's now catching on. Does that mean the product manager should be 4 weeks ahead of the engineering team? Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I even more potentially, and I would very much see it as a production cycle. And I think that you want to be at least starting to think about what you're going to be building. Now, obviously, everywhere we work, there's going to be deadlines. There's going to be things that we need to focus on, and you can't come in. If you come in on your first day and say, look, right, we're not doing anything for 6 weeks, of course, that's not going to win you any favor. So this is something I would see is, it has to be phased in over a period of time. You're obviously going to have things. You're going to have hot fixes. You're going to have bugs. You're going to, you have to be flexible as well, and I'm sure, if my CEO is watching this now, she would she knows that there are times that we just need to drop and get something in, and it needs to be done, and it's done in the week or whatever it could be. So you always need that flexibility, but long term, I would say definitely find again, doesn't have to be 4 weeks, but find a number that makes sense, because you will find that without that white hot heat of the sprint, you'll make better decisions. You can also involve people. I'm going to talk about that now a little bit, about kind of stakeholders, so who the stakeholders are. But thank you for the question. Okay, so we'll jump back into the preso. So yeah, so stakeholders. So for me, when I talk about stakeholders, I'm talking about, it's a word you see thrown around a lot. You can do exercises where you do stakeholder mapping, all those types of things. For me, stakeholder mapping is take a piece of paper and write down the people who you need to talk to about your product. It's nothing more complex than that. Again, in a slightly simplified scenario. So obviously your customers, hugely important. Your management, so senior leaders in your organization, the technical team. I think, whilst these activities are seen as being, underwater, I do think that I still would be involving, it's pre-development, but I definitely would still be involving the development team. So yeah, just basically make a quick list of who are the people who you need to get in, who you need to get involved with, and make sure that you're involving them in these underwater activities, like I call them, because I think it's really important. And understand that they have hugely different things that they're worried about, and ways of seeing the world. Your technical team are going to look at this one way. Your CEO is going to look at it another way. Your salespeople are going to look at it another way. So really, and this message hopefully will come across in my slides, is you need to be creating resources that cater for all of those different audiences. So some people will be obsessed with metrics. Some people will be be very visual. Other people obviously will be incredibly technical. So just again, these type of little activities, like going, right, these are my stakeholders. This is what they care about. They're this type of person in terms of being visual or data driven. It's really worth actually taking 20 minutes, half an hour to do that, because when you're preparing all of these artifacts that I'm going to get through, you need to be thinking about, okay, at the end of them, have I addressed each of these different stakeholders through it? Another thing, and this may seem simple, but pin it to your business goal. So name I am doing this because I want this to happen. And that seems really simplistic. But again, I think we lose ourselves in the, again, when you get up above the water level, you can lose ourselves in the features, and you can get into the detail, and really, implementation is there's lots going on. You've lots of questions to answer, all that kind of thing. So I find it's really useful to actually say, look, this is the goal of the business, and this is the reason why we're doing it. And if your product and your business goals aren't really overtly aligning, like, that should be a red flag. So while this might seem simplistic and might seem like almost something, almost a no-brainer, I think it's a good discipline to continually just state, right, we're doing this because we want to, we want to impact, and things like we want to increase revenue, or the bottom line. I think they need to be more, more concrete than that. I think what you're also doing as well, going back to your stakeholder interactions, is that these things that we're going to be creating and we're going to be showing these are opportunities for you also to demonstrate to the stakeholders in your organization that you're thinking about these things, and what these things are, and the reason why you're doing this is. So all of these things that I'm going to talk about we're trying to do them because what we're trying to do is we're trying to flesh out little inconsistencies between our understanding of problems and business requirements, those sorts of things. And again, I'd say the same thing with metrics, is write down the name of the metric of what it is that you're trying to improve. And again, if you can't find one, that might be there are going to be things that don't necessarily lead to metrics. Again, all of these are just almost best practices or things to consider. But what I've found is that by going through the kind of process of, as you say, literally naming these things, it just keeps you honest, and it keeps you and keeps you reminding your stakeholders that these things are in your mind. All right. So what to build? So the first thing I'll say is use a framework, any framework. Again, I think it was last week, Brian did a really excellent talk about roadmaps. Again, I'd really recommend you that's gone into, I have actually chosen not to go into a lot of detail on roadmaps in this, because I think one of the great things about these series of talks is they can sort of be used in conjunction with one another. He's answered it in such detail, and he talks about some of the frameworks that you can use. But the difference between no framework and a framework, and then those and the incremental differences between them, for me, is huge. And again, you're applying a rigor to your work, because we all build the wrong things. I've built the wrong things. I can think of numerous examples of things that I built over the years that were ultimately didn't get used by the customer, or in retrospect weren't. And looking back, I would say that I didn't go through this type of a process to do it. So bear in mind, and I'm going to build wrong things into the future. This is not a cure for this, but what it is, it's a way of hopefully solving it a little bit. Consider your bias. So again, we all have biases. Certain features that I like, certain things that I like, that I'm going to put in. So the framework really fleshes all these out. And again, comes back to engaging your stakeholders. So what this, I think it's reassuring for your stakeholders, for them to see that you are applying a science to this, you are applying a rigor to this. And again, you're continually reinforcing that idea of, okay, the business we want to focus on sales at the moment. Therefore, our framework is going to prioritize features that we believe will help us, develop new business for the time being. If that emphasis changes, something like, okay, we want to build up, we've had a rocky couple of months with some customers, and we want to really stabilize things, then you're going to prioritize something else, and you can adjust your framework accordingly. So I'll take you through kind of how I do that in a second. But again, what you're doing all the time is because part of there's a lot of power really with being able to sort of choose what actually gets built. And I think it's always good to make it really visible to people, and across all the different the thinking behind why you're building things. Similarly, getting into your technical team is explaining the details around why you're building certain things, such that they see the value of it also. And again, like I said, again, keep coming back to verbalizing the business goals. So, okay, we are doing this because we want to sell this to more people. We think more people buy this as a result of this feature. We are not doing this because we believe that our current customers are happy. And again, identify metrics. So put it through, and I'm talking about a really sort of, almost, I'm not saying how you're going to measure it, but yeah, what I'd say is I just like to pin these out. We're trying to increase the number of, ideas that we get. That might be one thing. So just got another question come in. So I'm going to pop that on as well. So yes, the question is, can you give an example of a couple of frameworks that you like? I can give you an example of the one that I use, which I made myself. So yeah, I'm not, I'd say, this is fit for purpose for me and for what we do. So again, a combination of knowing what type of PM you are, knowing what type of organization you're in, and then having knowledge of the different frameworks would be how I selected. So I wanted to pick something simple that we could get together as a team. And I'll show it to you now. And so you can see it. So we basically have an Excel spreadsheet. So it's as simple as that. And again, this is not about sort of going and picking complex tools. And I am a tool magpie. I love looking at new tools. I'm always trying out new tools. But really, when it comes back to, when it comes back to something like this, I think for me, we found that simplicity. So simply it's a case of saying, you can see here, we've got what are the features, what are the themes of it, and we go through each of the different business goals and departments. What are the things we're actually trying to impact? And then we score it. So we sit with a team of sort of cross-discipline team, and everyone gets to put in their score. We agree on the scores and we weigh it up at the end. And what was really interesting about this while we did it was that actually we found that it wasn't a million miles away from what we probably would have instinctively picked anyway. But there were definitely some features that actually scored quite, that were kicked out of the lineup. So this is kind of the process that we find, works well for us. We run it about every month, 6 weeks again. Kind of, we pick 3 to 5 and we do them, and then we come back and pick the next ones. And yeah, it's as I say, it's simple. I don't think the frameworks need to be, hugely complicated. You essentially need to do a simple matrix like this, which has the goals you're trying to achieve, and then the features in a kind of grid like this. And certainly for us, this has worked really well. All right. So integrating design effectively. So again, this I think is a really key thing here, is talking about considering different audiences. So some people are visual and some people aren't. And some people are, again, I'm lucky in my current role because, we have members of the team who will really, really focus on how it looks and how it, what happens when you click this, when you click that, when you do that. So in a way, I actually don't have to do that as much. But what I realized is really important is that I need to get those people mock-ups and visuals and a lot sooner than actually that I had been doing before. And also think about, spend your time on the big impact pieces. So again, there's this concept of minimum effective dose. And I think that really applies to a lot of what these underwater activities is. Sometimes these type of things can be overwhelming. So the idea of I've got to build a mock-up, or I've got to I've got to document this, or I've got to document that. I actually take a different approach, where I would say, what is the least amount of work really that I can get away with doing for this, such that it'll meet my goals of getting, of bringing all my stakeholders along for the journey in terms of visuals. So for me, what I found is minimum effective dose I've just spoken about. It's getting visuals. We use Figma. So Figma is a tool I'm sure you're all very familiar with. We basically take our existing system, chop it up, and we sort of, put new buttons in and do a fairly rudimentary. You're probably talking about half an hour, 40 minutes for a couple of screens. So this is not getting into InVision and making, full. Obviously, there's a time and place for that if you're doing a really big, maybe a greenfield product, whatever. But yeah, for what we have found is actually by visualizing, what this new sort of enhancement is going to look like, using Figma, using existing screenshots and buttons and relatively crudely drawn things, we can actually get we can minimize that kind of aftershock. Also, really helpful for the development team. They really like it. All of this stuff, I should say, I am socializing with everyone. So I'm socializing with the tech team along the way, and sending it to the different. So you're getting people to get what you're trying to do is flesh out all the different potential feedback, potential problems when it comes to that development time. So one more question. Let's jump into that now. How do you suggest addressing features that get a low score in the framework, but you have a strong intuition about their value to the end customer? I would say you need to build value to the end customer into your framework. So that's hugely, that for me is a major column. So, and I think that's what I mean about actually sort of stating the obvious sometimes with these things. So put in, yeah, I would say two things. Be careful with intuition, because intuition is, is, yeah, it can be, it's led us to build the wrong things, as I said. But I would be certainly, if it's something like that where you feel it's got an this has an over-ending value to the end customer, build it into your framework. But at least what you're explicitly stating there is, I think this has got real value, and I think that should be in the discussion when we're prioritizing. So the frameworks, don't let the framework be dictating what you do. You build a framework so that it again, it's just fleshing out those topics for discussion. Another question. That's great. How do you deal with different customers wanting different things? How do you prioritize the features requirements? Yeah, look, you're always going to have different customers wanting different things. One of the things I would say is what we've actually, this has been something I've, it's something I've always been slightly amazed at how well this has worked is have a conversation with your customers and tell them that you get lots of requests from people, and you have a process. You can even go so far as, I've worked in organizations where they almost directly show their Jira. They plugged in part of their website into Jira, and they will say, look, these are the things that we're working on, and this is where the request is coming in. So don't underestimate how how understanding actually your customers will be if you explain to them, look, we've got all these things. I'll tell them about how our process works. Be open, and I think that really, you need, what I find to get great traction with is as well saying, look, we have to make sure that this product works for everyone. We have to make sure that it works well for you into the future. We have to make sure, that it's sustainable. It goes back to what I said as my personal mission. It's going to be fast. We can roll things out quickly. So, that'll be something I'd definitely say. And then coming back to find a way to decide, you could base it on, the size of the customer. You could base it on the applicability across different customers. I would, build that into your own framework. Hopefully that helps. Okay, I'm going to jump back into the presentation. Okay, so just to sum up on design, look, you're gonna have cases where you've got big projects that have a big design element. So I'm probably more talking here about your sort of business as usual, where screenshots and Figma and those things will do. But the big takeaways for me are, what's the least you can do? Get it to people early, let them see it, let them have a think about it, because that'll actually start their brain thinking as well. And don't forget, they're going to be thinking about it as well. So if you're 4 weeks out from development, that's 4 weeks for their brains to be kind of kicking around as well. So that works really well. Product descriptions. This for me is probably the area that I've been refining most in the last few years of my career. And I believe it's really, really important. Again, minimal effective dose. I've seen product specifications, business requirements documents, whatever you want to call them. I've seen them up to 50 pages. No one reads them. So, if it's too long, if it feels like a mission to write, why do you think it's not going to be a mission to read? And people won't read. The reality is people won't read it. And what you end up having is, detail hidden amongst the pages, which just don't get implemented or not implemented the way that you anticipated. So keep it short. Again, keep it as short as possible. Use bullet points. I think I have it here. Yeah, use bullet points. Use FAQs. Use screenshots. So again, actually, in the current session, I picked up this. Some of the great things about being a mentor actually is that you actually you pick up loads as well. So I stole the FAQs thing from Pablo. I saw it in one of his product descriptions. So really good idea, which is like, go at the bottom of your product description and write FAQs give it to your customer facing team and ask them to think about, right, well, what's the first question that such and such a customer is going to ask? Because again, different perspectives. So really, for me, a product description document is about getting lots of different perspectives. So you sit down with your technical team and you go through it. I would include a background as to why you're doing it. I would include, as I said, metrics. I would include then pretty quickly, I'd be getting into what's it going to look like. And then go through each of the different features, explaining what they're going to do, how they're going to work, and then get it out in the wild, get it out to people as quickly as possible. So again, this is something you should be doing in the first week, I would say, because again, if we think about the bottom of the iceberg, as you're getting closer and closer to the water, you've less time to correct things. So to go back to the question earlier, if you're going to be 4 weeks isn't a lot of time in terms of being able to, understand how certain dynamics going to work, how certain, to solve. Should be generating problems that you need to solve. And again, always thinking in your head, these are for multiple audiences. So your visual people, your data people, your technical people, your sales people, your customer people, all of these different audiences are going to be looking at this. So write it like that. Don't write it like a really dry sort of instruction manual, I would say. Write it as a document for discussion, because that's what you're trying to do with all these things, is generate discussion so that people can go and can kick it around a little bit. So for us, we use Notion. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's kind of, I guess, a wiki style tool. But what I like about it, it's really quick. It's really nice to use. It can support. It's not too fancy. You can drop things in pretty quickly, and get it up and going and share it really, really easily. So yeah, for me, like a product description document is no more than, it might be 2 pages. It's not much more than that. And then you sit and go through it with your different teams and kind of see what they come up with. So once you've done that, so you decided what to build, you have built, done some design elements, you've gone through your product description, and you've kicked it all around. We're now going to get into tickets. So for me, I'm a big Jira fan, have always been. I know it's can divide opinion, but I've always liked it. So I'd say include as much detail as possible. So this is where you're getting into your detail, because this is this is what your development teams are going to be basing it on. So the theory, I would say, is that any member of the team, somebody who walks in off the street, could in theory pick up this ticket and understand what it's about and where it. So it should have things, describing what the current situation is, what the what the next iteration of the work will be. Use acceptance criteria. Just give as much detail as you can. I always include videos, screenshots, to show kind of how a particular feature is. Try and record your videos in the same environments that your development team have access to as well. It's just really, it is worth it. The time you spend in tickets really pays off in development, I found. The tickets that kind of sail through from to do to done with the least amount of friction, which I really think that's actually, I see that the key thing for a product manager to do is to ease the transition of those pieces of work through the development process. And I know, and look, this doesn't always happen. If you were to open my Jira now and you've randomly picked a ticket, I would be hopeful that it would be in good condition, but obviously, there's time constraints, tickets get, things need to be worked on quickly. I get all that. But I found in my experience, the more effort you put into it, it'll be the first thing I would look at if I went in somewhere was, show me your tickets, make them as small as possible. I don't particularly like tickets that are bigger than a day. I think that's again, in my experience, it tends to be more successful. Make them as small as possible. Again, these are sort of things that we all know, but I just wonder, do we really keep ourselves, everyone has their lapses and things slip through, but this is kind of the best scenario. So screenshots, videos, again, different readers focus on different things. And again, be looking at, like, if a ticket hasn't made it through that journey as sort of as smoothly as you would like, look at it and see why, and ask your team and talk about it. All these things are, you can probably see what I'm really encouraging here is a huge amount of collaboration. These are vehicles for you to have conversations with your stakeholders. So tool of choice is Jira. Okay. So then finally, we come to refining your process. So one thing we've started doing recently, which has actually been really nice, is just having a feature retro with that group of stakeholders who've been involved. It tends to be done with technical teams. It's kind of baked into the psyche, I guess, and that's great. But I think actually widening that out to some of your some of the non-technical teams has actually proved to be really interesting and a really useful thing to do. It fleshes out some of the, do I have it next? Document your process as well. So again, I'm not talking about, like, for me, documentation is, I'm a huge believer in getting in, writing some stuff down and iterating and iterating and iterating. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to be getting your thoughts down on paper so you can actually go and sort of make changes to it. But even as well, the process of actually, and I do a huge amount, you can see it here, I do a huge amount of just writing things out on bits of paper and organizing my thoughts in that way. So write out your kind of production line and document it. A classic one is it was in the spec. And I think it was in the spec it's a failing, basically. You're probably right. It was in the spec, I would say. But if something gets out into production and one of your stakeholders comes back to you and asks you why it's there and you're saying it's in the spec, I think you have to try and have a open mind to the possibility that actually that's a failing in your process. So, the thing about communication is that it's up to you to present things in a way that your audience hears you. And as I said, there's audiences come in many different shapes. And so for me, it's a classic one, and I've experienced it obviously many times in my career. So something within the spec and it gets out to the customers or whomever it is. Just watch out for that one, because I think our initial kind of feeling as humans is like, yeah, well, I mean, it was in the spec, and I we developed it that way but actually, I think let that one simmer for a minute, and then afterwards come back and sort of realize, do you know what? I need to look at how that piece wasn't sufficiently communicated. It's still going to happen, by the way, but just, try and minimize it. And then just tool of choice, I just really simple again, keep it really, really basic and just schedule the meetings. Just get people together and say, look, we released this feature last week. We did one of these recently, and we had a frank conversation around some of it wasn't how some of the team imagined it. So we got together and we had a bit of a chat about it. Some new tickets went into the board just to make refinements, and some name came to a good conclusion. I think we learned things for refining our process. So get people together and have a bit of a conversation around it. So I can see another question has come in. Okay. Okay, great question. So how do you deal with developers in your team? People each have their own individualities and do not all respond to the same incentives. Some people are also quite reluctant to strict processes. I deal with developers in my team primarily through Jira and then through Slack. But I'll also, as much as possible, I will get on video calls, have conversations, have as many conversations as you can. People 100% have their own individualities, definitely. What's really interesting is, even in terms of a real communication trap that people fall into is they assume that their way of communicating is the way that everybody else communicates. So I'm obviously I like meetings, I like talking to people, I like being, I'm quite vocal about things, but actually exactly as you said, that's not everyone responds to those sort of things. So I think you have to present your message in lots of different ways. I would like to think that really my processes aren't strict. I'm actually trying to take away a lot of the kind of strictness around some of the process. I'm strict with my own process, but the actual sort of the items that or the artifacts themselves, I try to keep them as light as possible. So keeping your requirements documents light, keeping your the interactions light as well. So yeah, I mean, don't make the process more than the value it's delivering. So I think your job is to kind of be that conduit. You're the one has to go and sort of probably how you talk to your senior stakeholders will be really different to how you talk to other people. So you are that person who's going around and addressing all those different pieces, as I see it. How do you prevent scope creep? Put a sentence in that says not doing. That's a key part of a product description document, is saying that you're not doing something, or sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you have to just, we had a feature that we released recently, and we went through this whole process, and everyone was happy with it, and we then got to the end, we realized actually by making this one change we're going to make meant that we needed to actually build on another feature. So we kind of bolted on an extra bit of a feature through it. So that's okay. You're allowed to do that. But again, what you're doing is you're communicating all the time why you're doing it. And again, it was actually one of our senior stakeholders who kind of realized, look, we need, and they had this unique insight, which was, if we roll out this way, it's going to actually cause an effort. So scope creep is, it's difficult. Yeah, I won't lie. But stating what you're not going to do is huge. And then also, being upfront and saying, look, if we do this is going to increase the amount of time that this takes. So that is the end of my presentation. It's just come to the end of our time as well. So I'd like to thank everyone. Some great questions in there, and I hope I addressed them as best I could. So yeah, thank you all for attending. And as always, the presentation will also be posted to our SlideShare channel. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, just like me, to product people of all sorts from around the world, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And I really must say, this is my second session. It's been a really, really beneficial and enjoyable initiative to be involved in, and hugely beneficial actually for me, and hopefully for my mentees as well. Okay, so follow us on Instagram at Product People. And if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own and free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And finally, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you all next time. So thank you very much, and hopefully everyone stays safe out there as well. Thank you.